What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from SBMTG. We're liking a magic, and you know we're doing Ravnica Legion spoilers today. We've got at least 18 cards to talk about, and they might spoil some more while I'm sitting here on the couch. So let's go ahead and get to it. There's a lot to discuss. To kick things off, we'll begin today with some lower rarity limited playable stuff like Humongulous, Burning Tree Vandal, and Titanic Brawl for starters here. Humongulous, actually looking pretty good. Big 5 toughness dude with hexproof is good in a limited environment, but it also slots right in to the standard Pauper deck, so do keep an eye out for that. But Burning Tree Vandal is a little bit more complex, but still probably just limited playable. I actually kind of like a lot about this card, to be honest, especially in the limited environment. It's just a common guy. You're likely to pick up multiple copies of this some of the time. And you can make it a 3-2, which is decent stat line, and it rummages for you when it attacks. Or you can just have it rummage for you the turn it hits the battlefield, which is actually really good value. And Titanic Brawl is fantastic. It might actually be one of the best of these commons that we got to see today, especially just for limited specifically. It's going to be decent in the Simic deck or the Gruul deck. Know that it works with both mechanics, which is pretty sweet. And a 1 mana, effectively 1 mana instant speed Prey Upon is pretty good. Prey Upon's already 1 mana, but it's sorcery speed, you know. So I actually really like this card. It's a fine piece of situational removal for the limited environment in a couple of different guilds. I like the, sort of stretch play on this card. And even if you have to pay the full 2 mana for it, oh my goodness, it's actually not that terrible either, especially if we're just talking draft and sealed. So that's a fine card, but we saw another couple of commons aside from just those today. We saw Grasping Thrall, which doesn't look bad, and Blade Juggler, which actually looks kind of good. Now, note when I say actually looks kind of good, I mean maybe outside of limited. Dusk Legion Zealot is probably just a better card, all things considered, but it's nice that you can play 8 copies of Dusk Legion Zealot. This one will cost you a mana more, but it has a way better stat line if you can spectacle it out. So I actually think this thing might have a tiny shot, and in Standard Pauper especially, in those arena events, this is probably going to be a really, really considerable card when you're building a deck with black in it. And Grasping Thrall, fine value creature here, 5 mana 3/3 flyer isn't the absolute best line in the world, but it's not bad, especially for a common in limited. I think that's the most noteworthy thing about this card is its rarity in that, again, you're somewhat likely, you can't count on it, but you're somewhat likely to see multiple copies of this in a game, or in a draft or a sealed environment. So if you get more than one, I think that it doesn't necessarily put you in Orzhov by itself, but it is a very nice card to have if you are in Orzhov. But let's look at the best common of the day, and that is Quench. Just 1 to blue for an instant, counter target spell unless its controller pays 2. Now, here's the thing. We've seen, better versions of this card throughout Magic history, way back, Miscalculate was a better version of this. Rune Snag is a better version of this. There's definitely better versions of this card, but in this particular standard environment, I actually think this is probably bound to see a fair amount of play. It's just immediately the best early game counterspell for a control deck. And I say early, but it actually works all the way up until the mid game against many, many decks. And I like it in a format where, we have Jumpstart, for instance. So if you're trying to Chemister's Insight, and late in the game and this is just dead in your hand, then it's a pretty good card to discard. So I liked it a little bit of extra play on it, but mostly this is just going to be a slam dunk control card. We've only seen a couple of those so far in this set. I don't think the control is going to be super oppressive, but this is going to probably be a bread and butter counterspell for them that they're going to play a few copies of. There are also a bunch of uncommons spoiled today, but there's a huge difference in power level between some of these. There were some bad ones and some good ones. And even the bad ones kind of look pretty good. You got to see Bankrupt in Blood, Biogenic Upgrade, and Angelic Exaltation to start things out. Well, Exaltation is just Exalt. It's perfectly named. This works really well alongside creatures that are already exalted. It gives them yet another exalted boost. And it lets you just play an exalted deck in standard if you want to play a budget thing, I don't think this is going many places, but it is at least an interesting card. It's a cool callback to an ability that a lot of players love. Biogenic Upgrade is pretty hilarious looking. This looks like it might actually end up as a one-of in a janky Simic Adapt deck or something. But this is mostly, and I think obviously, for limited play, where this is actually not bad, even if your dudes don't necessarily have +1/+1 counters already. It at least makes dudes bigger. You can put all the counters on one guy or distribute them among a bunch of guys, and all that's fine. But in a deck like, the Gruul deck or the Adapt deck that's bound to have a bunch of creatures with +1/+1 counters on them, this is pretty much a game-ending card. But Bankrupt in Blood is probably the card of these 3 that I'm most excited about, even though I'll acknowledge it's probably the biggest trap. Sacrificing 2 guys is awful. I already don't like cards like Costly Plunder that require you to give up board presence to draw cards. Sometimes it's good in the exact right deck, and the same thing is true of this card. Decks that want dice triggers, or decks that are playing with afterlife creatures, where this actually will create card advantage if you have afterlife creatures or Hunted Witness or something. So all that's good. An aristocrat style deck, or maybe it's something that works out of its graveyard, would maybe like to play this card. So it's on my radar, but again, man, like Costly Plunder didn't show up in decks. I know people will probably fight back on that, but Costly Plunder didn't show up in any real competitive decks, and I don't know if this really has the chops to either. 3 cards is an awful lot, though, but, like when we've had Tormenting Voice forever. The Cathartic Reunion came out, and we were like, oh, 3 cards. Oh, okay. I don't think this is the an analog to a card like Costly Plunder in the way the Cathartic Reunion was to a card like Tormenting Voice. Sacrificing 2 guys is just a really, really big ask, but drawing 3 cards is really, really nice, and if you're getting dice triggers or 1/1 flyers off of those sacrifices, then you're pretty happy with that. And real quick, just because I didn't want to put 4 cards on the screen at the same time, here's Snowboard Ignis. This is the other limited playable uncommon from the day. And you could maybe make a case this could be standard playable. I actually think this card is relatively powerful. I know you have to sacrifice it to use its ability, but just the fact that it's a treason on a stick, an active treason on a stick, is kind of good enough considering the stat line. 2-mana, 2/1 is alright. And we do need some good red 2-drops, and we have seen some. We'll actually see another one in just a second, but Snowboard Ignis could do a couple of damage for you in the early game, and then sacrifice to get the best creature off their side of the table and finish the game for you. I really like the threat of activation on this card, but I'm really not sure that it's enough to carry it into constructed play. That said, an active treason effect is always something I'll welcome in the sealed environment especially, so I do like this card. But let's get into the good uncommons today. First of all, there's Zhurtog Goblin. This is 2 mana, a red and a green for a 2/2 Goblin Berserker with Riot. And that is good enough. It really is. Bread and butter aggro creature is going to see a lot of play in the Gruul decks. It's basically the de facto Gruul 2-drop, It's kind of a Watch Wolf. That's pretty nice, just a 2-mana 3/3. But it's also, Rip Clan Crasher? I forget the exact name of it, but it's 2-mana 2/2, or 2/1 with haste. And that's, what's 2/2? With haste. And so I like to play the versatility on this Riot card is really, really good, If you're up against other aggro decks, you make it a 3/3. But if you're up against control or other slower decks where you just want to get in damage quickly, make it a 2/2 haste, The choice on this is really, really, really nice. I mean, you can say that about every Riot card, but this is going to be especially important in the early game for either making sure you can stack up to other creature-based decks or just getting in fast damage, Again, the versatility here is extremely key, and I wish I had more to say about this card, but it's just kind of undeniably good and really, really simple. But let's check out Savage Rhythm right here. This is 3 mana, 1 a red and a green for an enchantment. Creature spells you control can't be countered, and non-token creatures you control have Riot. So this is one that people are freaking out about, mostly comparing it to Fires of Yavimaya, which was a really important card back in the day. I actually loved the Fires deck, but this isn't necessarily Fires. Is it better is the question. All depends on the situation. Fires had the ability to sacrifice to give a creature +2/+2, which kind of meant that your opponent had to block all of your guys, or they were screwed, especially in the relative late game, just a couple of turns after you cast Fires. Fires is good in for 2 turns and then kind of drops off in playability unless you top deck something ridiculous. But often being able to sacrifice Fires for the boost was actually a very, very important and underrated part of that card. That said, Fires of Yavimaya did not make your creatures uncounterable, and Riot is just strictly better than Haste, right? I mean, so this is a playable card, I think. It kind of looks like more of a sideboard card, all things considered. You just play this against control on your board. I don't know if this will make the starting 60, but it is obviously an extremely good sideboard card. But it could make the starting 60. Again, Fires was a really good card. And in some ways, but not all, this is a better one. So I fully expect this to be an oppressive card against control decks. People are freaking out that blue-white's going to be too good. And every time, like Quench got spoiled. And people were like, oh, it's too good. It's worse. It's worse than a lot of other cards we've seen. But people are just on a hair trigger about blue-white control. And cards like this are going to do an awful lot to help combat that deck in the format. Well, let's check out my favorite uncommon of the day. This is Frilled Mystic right here. It's 4 mana, 2 green, 2 blue, one of these. For a 3/2 elf lizard wizard, my lizard wizard with flash. And when it enters the battlefield, you may counter target spell. So it's a Mystic Snake, but it's awesome. It's got a better body than Mystic Snake by just a tick, but still a better body than Mystic Snake, even though it's slightly tougher to cast. That said, I think this is going to see a buttload of standard play in a variety of possible decks. You know, people are already wanting to put together Band Control. And this probably slots pretty well right into that, but note that since it's a creature, things like Vivian can pick it up, or that new Simic Split card can pick it up. Adventurous Impulse can get it for you. You know, I think that's actually, in some ways, it's really important that this is a creature. Things like Fine Finality and Golgari Fine Broker can get it out of your graveyard. That is a big, big game. The fact that you can just find back a copy or 2 of this in the late game and just have a counterspell on a body up in your hand that your opponent knows about, they will sweat that, man. This is actually the card type creature is really, really important on this for a lot of reasons in this format. And it's not a bad body either. You know, think about it this way. If you counter a spell when this comes out and then trade with a creature in combat, that is fantastic. So I just expect this to see a load of play. I am thrilled to have it in the format. Ahem, but still, you know, bad jokes aside, this is one of the best of this cycle of cards that we've seen in both Ravnica sets, from what I'm concerned. This probably will see all of the play. Well, let's get to the rares here with Rampage of the Clans. It's 4 mana, 3 and a green for an instant. Instant, by the way. Destroy all artifacts and enchantments. For each permanent destroyed this way, its controller creates a 3/3 green centaur creature token. I think this is sort of a payoff for an enchantments deck. That's how I want to play it, at least, you know, is just put a bunch of enchantments on the battlefield for some sort of incremental value while they're out. And then just create a bunch of 3/3s and swing in. This is instant speed, so you can destroy like 5 of your own enchantments at the end of, you know, their turn. And then suddenly you're swinging in for 15. And this seems fun at the very least. But this is obviously a pretty decent sideboard card. I hate that it's going to leave behind a bunch of 3/3s, but there are situations where that is totally fine, and of course, you got to love the instant speed on it. I'm not absolutely sure this should have been a rare. You know, we just saw 2 uncommons that probably could have been rares. But at the same time, I think this could see some sort of wonk kind of play, you know, again in that enchantments deck I described. Or if there is a deck that just plays all of the artifacts and enchantments, it's possible that this could be a sideboard card. But again, giving them a bunch of bodies in exchange for all of their artifacts and enchantments could definitely backfire. Just put it that way. But here's Guardian's Plan right here. Rough translation, just fair warning. It's 4 mana, 3 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature does not share a name with another creature you control or have in your graveyard, draw a card. Well, this is Commander stuff, right? I mean, it obviously works better in Commander because you probably won't be having creatures that share names with one another in that format, so that seems pretty good. But aside from that, I don't know, man. Like a bulk rare in Standard or something. I don't think this is particularly great in any competitive format, but in Commander, this is probably good. Although, I have to wonder if there have got to be better options in this. Here's another Commander playable 4 mana enchantment right here. Smothering Tide. It's 4 mana, 3 and a white for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If the player doesn't, you create a colorless treasure artifact token with tap, sacrifice this artifact, blah. You know what treasure does, it's back. The art is super memeable. I've already brought that up on Twitter. I love this art. But aside from that, this is yet another crazy 4 mana Commander enchantment that's going to see play in white decks specifically, probably until the end of time. Where if this isn't taken care of, it can get you a bunch of treasures just by the time your next turn rolls around. It's incredible mana fixing in that format. I don't think it goes anywhere else. You know, like Black-White Revel in Riches, maybe. You know, because you're at least going to get a treasure return if they don't want to pay the 2 mana for it. And you could make the argument that this doesn't do nothing the turn you play it. You know, you play it, you say go, and then it might generate a treasure immediately for you. So that's not bad either. That said, though, I count this out of Standard play. I really don't think that this is anything unless it's some kind of crazy sideboard card for a deck that wants to draw all the things. You know, maybe it's tech against Chart of Course or Precognitive Perception or Expansion Explosion. I don't know. The new Genesis. I always want to call it Genesis Hydroid Crisis. Cat Crackling Drake. Actually, I'm talking myself into this, but I'm not really. It's a joke. I don't like this for constructed at all. But again, in Commander, that's what it's made for. It's going to see all the play for the rest of the time there. But let's check out Verity Circle, ladies and gentlemen. This is 3 mana, 2 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes tapped, if it isn't being declared as an attacker, you may draw a card. And you pay 4 and a blue to tap a creature without flying. This is yet another card that can see all of the Commander play, maybe forever. It seems like a desirable thing to do in Commander, where it's full of activated abilities that make the creatures tap, and mana dorks for that matter. And a bunch of other things they might tap creatures for. So this looked pretty good in Commander, but I'm kind of sick of saying that about all these cards. I think it's a good day for Commander enchantments, you know. So it's a win for you guys. But at the same time, I think that this might actually be playable in constructed formats, even though it's kind of, sort of, a do-nothing 3-mana enchantment, which I usually don't like. But, again, against mana dorks, which there are at least some of in Standard, you know, you see Llanowar Elves, obviously. It's one of the more played creatures in this format, but there's Druid of the Cowl and a couple of other things. So at least there's that. But there's also Convoke. This seems specifically meant to host Convoke in this format. So there's also that, you know. So I do like some sneaky things about this card. And once you do have all of the mana, you can tap down guys and draw cards and, like, Maze of Ith them, you know, keep them from attacking you. And draw a card. It costs an awful lot of mana, but it's an option in the very, very late game. I like that about it. You know, if you draw just a few cards a game off of this and keep a couple of guys from attacking you, it's probably done its job, but I'm still not sure that it was worth your turn 3 in that situation. And if you want to hose mana dorks and Convoke and stuff like that, chances are you have to play this on turn 3 and forego leaving mana up for a counterspell or removal or whatever. So I definitely do have some problems with it, but I do have some unproblems with it, some solutions with it. And I was like, what's the opposite problem? There are some things that I do like about the card altogether, but I'm leaning towards no on any kind of real constructed play, but you never know on something like this. It might surprise you. It's actually a pretty good line of text. But that doesn't mean I'm not excited for it. Don't get it twisted. But on to the last card of the day, so far at least. You guys know me, I'll reload Mythic Spoiler one time before we're out of here, but I think the most exciting card of the day is definitely Electro Dominance. This was already kind of on my list of decent cards today, but an interaction that had to be pointed out to me definitely makes the card a lot more worth looking at. But in any case, this is 2 red and X for an instant, and it deals X damage to any target. You may cast a card with converted mana cost X or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. So that is already very, very nuts. Note, too, that it's instant speed. That's crazy. It's a strictly better, what was it, Volcanic Geyser, the first instant speed fireball kind of effect, you know. The instant speed is good enough on this, but the fact that it just allows you to play a spell with no timing restrictions, by the way. You cast this at instant speed, you can play a sorcery or something, you know. So that's worthy of note too. You get a free spell off of it. You know, it's almost like you just add 2 onto the cost of any spell you were going to cast anyway, and you kind of get like a quicken effect on the spell too for your trouble. So all of that is good enough, I think. You know, just the idea of, you know, they swing in, and then you dominate one of their creatures and drop another creature to block another guy. That's a crazy play line right there. But what really broke this card through for me was people talking about it on Spikes. You know, I didn't really realize that you could just cast like Ancestral Visions for free or Living In for free with this card and just a 2-mana investment at instant speed. And in the meantime, it doubles as removal if you happen to need that too. So this card is not necessarily busted, but it's cracking. It's cracking. This card looks very, very good to me. And I think the only real question about Standard play is whether you play this over Banefire in a format where Control is looking to be a pretty good deck. You know, I don't think Control is looking like a dominant deck, especially with some of the checks and balances that they put into plays. But I do think Control is looking like one of the Tier 1 or Tier 1.5 decks. So with that said, this is, it really is a consideration whether you play this or Banefire in a format like that. But just, getting a pseudo-free spell off of it at instant speed and ignoring timing restrictions, not even to mention, the play that it might have in older formats because of free, quote-unquote, free suspend spells. This card is just over the top. But I've just reloaded Mythic Spoiler, and there's nothing new, so I think we're safe for now. And usually there aren't spoilers on the weekend, so I might not see you guys again till Monday. But I might squeeze a video in there actually in the weekend. There's some extra, added thoughts I have on some of the stuff that's been spoiled so far, and there's some stuff I really want to talk about. Like I could go on for an hour about all the stuff you can do with Judith, So I might come back and just ramble into the camera for, an hour sometime over the weekend, but who knows when we'll get more spoilers. Monday at the very, very latest. So I'll see you again then. But in the meantime, do all the YouTube stuff, if you would please like the video, it helps me out tremendously for very low effort on your part. Make sure you subscribe to get all the spoilers, and my exclusive preview is coming out on the 10th of this month. That's only a few days from now. Make sure you're subscribed because this is my favorite preview ever, and that's all I can tell you about. I'm super hyped for this one. But aside from that, make sure that you check out TCG Playa down there. Link in the description if you want to check them out as kind of a price guide, barometer for where everyone's feeling about these cards right now. Just click the link for that. Really helps me out when you click that. They see that people click the link and they're like, hey, Dev, you're getting a lot of clicks. That's good. Good work, buddy. So just clicking the link helps me out. Do that if you would. And if you really want to be an awesome person, then you can just click the link in the description to go to Patreon or patreon.com/SBMTG and just throw $1 a month in there. That helps me out incredibly and helps you out too. You get to vote on what decks you want to see first this coming up season, affect the course of YouTube history itself. That's pretty cool. And I'll let you know what decks and videos we end up doing just the day before we do them. So you get a 24-hour advance notice on the next day's video topic. That's not bad either. So if you can throw $1 in the pot, help me out. You have no idea how much it does in fact help. But I think that's all the pitching I have to do to you. Aside from that, just go to the comment section. Let me know how you feel about all these and my assessment of them, and let me know yours. So your assessment, that is, not your favorite color. In any case, I think I'm done. This is another video, by the way, where Ziggy's been down here the whole time. I could probably get away with panning the camera down and just focusing on Ziggy literally the entire time. You can't even see my face while I'm talking about these cards. I think people might enjoy that more, but the Sleepy Bub's been down here the whole time. He's chilling out, but anyway, I guess I'll catch you cats later. I'm just rambling at this point. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.